There seems to be trouble in paradise. The grifters, our favourites, Whinger and Ginger, Harry and Meghan, have reportedly cut household staff to try and save money.
You probably think Meghan Markle's whole compassion thing is just good PR that went a bit overboard. But here's the crazy part.
James Holt is leaving.
A royal chef just spoke out about what really happened behind closed doors, and the claims are seriously disturbing.
The way she treated me, she says, of Meghan, can only be described as dehumanizing.
We're talking about specific demands that supposedly left kitchen staff crying, not just upset, actually breaking down in the pantry because the difference between what Meghan says publicly about kindness and how she allegedly acted in private was that bad. This isn't tabloid gossip. This is someone who worked there connecting the dots to the wave of staff who quit during Meghan's time at the palace. And if these claims are true, they don't just go against her carefully built image, they destroy it completely.
I think there was a report, something like 18 over the past 6 years. That's a lot of people. And you've got to ask yourself, is there something wrong with the people, or is there something wrong with the Sussexes? And my guess is it's the latter.
Let's start with what Meghan has said about herself publicly. Mental health advocate, supporting vulnerable people, making sure staff feel safe to speak up. It's all over the Archewell Foundation website. She's built her entire post-royal career on the idea that she knows what it's like to be treated badly and would never do that to others. But here's where things get really weird. When she was a working royal, tons of palace staff left their jobs. We're not talking about 1 or 2 people moving on. We're talking about so many people quitting that major news outlets had to cover it.
Well, that would seem to be the case, Dickie. In fact, there's a term for this. It's called Sussex, which I think is floating around.
The palace tried to control the story at first. Normal HR stuff, cultural differences, the usual corporate talk that means nothing, but then rumors started spreading. Difficult Duchess, impossible demands, staff supposedly going on stress leave, and the palace couldn't keep it quiet anymore. Now a royal chef has decided to speak out. And what they're saying doesn't just add to the rumors, they're giving specific real examples that explain why so many people supposedly couldn't handle working for Meghan.
Someone new who left. So these numbers we've been reporting for years aren't accurate at all. The turnover is horrible.
The first demand sounds almost silly until you get the full picture. According to the chef, Meghan supposedly required specific organic ingredients that weren't part of the normal royal shopping list. Not just organic, specific brands, specific suppliers, sometimes ingredients that had to come from certain areas because nothing else was good enough. Think about what that actually means for the kitchen staff. The royal family has regular suppliers, regular ways of doing things, regular budgets, and suddenly someone is supposedly demanding ingredients that need special orders, special deliveries, and special treatment, all while keeping up with royal meal standards. But here's what makes this really bad. These weren't polite requests.
I think the problem is probably Meghan. She has a reputation of not being easy. We had all this to do when they were still working royals, that people were leaving their offices in Kensington Palace because they alleged they were being bullied, that Meghan was calling them at 5 o'clock in the morning.
According to the chef, these were demands that couldn't be questioned. And when staff tried to explain why something was difficult or suggest other options, they supposedly got anger and accusations of not caring about her health. The irony is almost too perfect. The woman who spent years talking about supporting staff and creating healthy workplaces was supposedly creating the exact opposite for the people making her meals. And this wasn't just about food preferences. According to the chef, Meghan supposedly had specific rules about how ingredients were stored, how meals were cooked, and even what pots and pans could be used. Each demand made an already hard job even harder. The chef says kitchen staff became ground zero for the gap between Meghan's public image and her supposed private behavior.
Another point they made was the mask slipped after about 6 weeks, that Meghan was like a fairy, like so happy and just full of joy and sweetness. But after about 6 weeks, the mask slipped and they felt like the real Meghan came out to play, and that Meghan typically is ugly when Harry's not around.
In public, she's the caring humanitarian. In the kitchen, she was supposedly the demanding client who couldn't understand why her crazy requirements caused problems for the people trying to help her. Remember this pattern because it explains everything that comes next. The food demands weren't one-time things. They were the start of a bigger pattern that would lead to all those staff quitting that even Buckingham Palace couldn't hide. But those food demands were just the start. According to the chef, the second big problem was how Meghan supposedly insisted on getting ingredients in ways that broke royal rules. The palace has suppliers who have worked with the royal family for decades, trusted companies with security clearance and long relationships. These aren't random choices. They're part of a system designed to keep things consistent and safe. Meghan supposedly wanted to skip that whole system. She reportedly wanted ingredients from specific small suppliers that hadn't been checked by palace security. When staff explained the security rules and buying procedures, she supposedly dismissed those concerns as unnecessary red tape that didn't apply to her. Think about what that meant for the people trying to do what she asked. They weren't just dealing with picky preferences, they were being asked to possibly break established rules that existed for good reasons. And when they pushed back, they supposedly got accused of being inflexible or unsupportive.
And that has been the problem. It's difficult to work for them. You don't actually know what you're doing, because I don't think they actually know what they're doing.
The chef describes how stressful it was trying to meet standards that were genuinely impossible within palace rules. You're trying to follow protocol while being told those rules don't matter. You're trying to explain real problems while being treated like you're making excuses. The stress wasn't just about the work, it was about being in situations where you couldn't win. The third claim is where the tears part gets really disturbing. According to the chef, when things weren't done exactly how Meghan wanted, there was supposedly public humiliation in front of other staff. Not private feedback, not helpful criticism, public put-downs that left people feeling degraded and disrespected.
But if Harry catches Meghan being nasty, he does step in and defend the staff, which I thought was incredibly interesting.
One specific incident supposedly involved a meal that wasn't prepared exactly right. Instead of talking to the chef privately, Meghan supposedly called several staff members to talk about the mistake in front of each other. The message was clear. This is what happens when you don't meet my standards. The chef describes coworkers literally crying in the pantry after these encounters, not because they couldn't take criticism, because the supposed treatment felt deliberately mean and way over the top for any actual mistake. Now connect these kitchen stories to the timeline of staff leaving. Melissa Tubati, Meghan's personal assistant, left after 6 months. Samantha Cohen, who worked for the Queen for 17 years, left after working with Meghan. Amy Pickerel, who helped organize the royal wedding, quit shortly after. The list goes on. The palace tried to say this was normal staff turnover, but when you look at the pattern, it's impossible to ignore.
Well, they're becoming isolated because they're making themselves isolated, because does anybody worth their salt really want to go and work for them? And you do wonder why some of the people that have gone...
These weren't people who struggled with royal life. They were experienced professionals who supposedly couldn't handle working specifically for Meghan. Each kitchen demand becomes proof of the gap between what Meghan says publicly and how she supposedly acts privately. She talks about mental health and supporting staff. But according to this chef, she was supposedly creating the exact work environment that destroys mental health and makes staff quit. The tears in the pantry weren't just emotional reactions to a tough boss. They were the human cost of trying to work for someone whose public compassion apparently didn't reach the people actually working for her. And here's where the story gets really complicated, because these are unproven claims from an anonymous source. The chef hasn't given their name publicly, there's no official testimony, no documents of specific incidents, just claims we can't independently confirm. So let's be totally clear about what we actually know versus what's still just claims. Here are the confirmed facts.
Recently, well, James Holt has been with them since 2018, so he knew what he was getting into. He was their communications to start off with. He was then Chief of Staff for the Archewell Foundation from 2021, so he knew all about them.
Buckingham Palace did a formal investigation into bullying claims against Meghan in 2021. The results were never released, but the investigation happened. That's confirmed. Several senior staff members did leave their jobs during or right after Meghan's time as a working royal. That's also confirmed. The timeline of people leaving is public record. In March 2021, Buckingham Palace released a statement saying they were clearly very concerned about claims in a Times of London article that said Meghan drove 2 personal assistants out and hurt the confidence of a third. The palace said their HR policies would be reviewed. That's an official admission that something needed investigation. Meghan's representatives have always denied claims of bullying or mistreating staff. They've said the claims are part of a planned smear campaign to undermine her. They've pointed to the timing of claims often coming right before major Sussex announcements as proof of coordinated attacks. The other side of the argument goes like this. Meghan came from a completely different work world. She had standards that worked in Hollywood but clashed with centuries-old palace ways of doing things. What looked like demands to staff might have been normal requests in her previous career. What felt like criticism might have been standard feedback she gave and got in film and TV production. The reason anonymous sources are everywhere in this story is obvious. Royal staff sign non-disclosure agreements. Talking publicly about working for the family can end your career in that world forever. Even if you have real complaints, going on record means professional suicide. That's why we get anonymous chefs and unnamed former assistants and sources close to stories. It's not necessarily because the claims are fake. It's because the cost of speaking publicly is genuinely devastating. But here's the pattern even doubters can't dismiss. The exodus is documented. Whether individual claims about kitchen demands or pantry tiers are accurate, the fact is that an unusual number of experienced staff left jobs working specifically for Meghan. That's not speculation, that's documented reality. So what does this pattern actually mean for the Sussex brand? The brutal truth is that insider stories don't just hurt the compassion brand, they completely destroy it. Because Meghan's entire post-royal identity is built on being the person who knows what it's like to be mistreated. The Oprah interview, the podcast about stereotypes, the constant mentions of being silenced and unsupported. Her brand is victimhood turned into activism. But when the people who actually worked for her start telling their stories, that whole narrative falls apart. You can't be both the caring advocate for vulnerable people and the person who supposedly made staff cry in the pantry. Those two things can't both be true. The chef's story connects to a bigger pattern of sources close to stories that have followed the Sussexes since leaving royal life. Former staff speaking anonymously, palace insiders giving details to reporters. Each new story reinforces the same basic message. The public image and the private reality are very different. And here's why kitchen staff stories are especially damaging. These aren't political people with agendas. They're not rival royals protecting their turf. They're invisible workers just trying to do their jobs. When a chef says you made their coworkers cry over organic ingredients, there's no spin that makes that okay. The PR damage is huge. Every new staff claim forces Meghan to either respond and keep the story going or stay quiet and let the accusations stand. Neither option works. Responding looks defensive and brings more attention. Silence looks like admitting it's true. Think about the ultimate contradiction here. Meghan and Harry left the royal family specifically to escape constant media attention. They wanted privacy. They wanted control over their story. They wanted to live life on their own terms without palace rules. Instead, they're facing constant staff leaks they can't control. The very people they supposedly mistreated are now the sources undermining everything they're trying to build. They traded royal protocol for staff exposés, and the exposés are way more damaging because they're personal rather than institutional. The long-term damage isn't just about individual claims. It's about the pattern creating a permanent counterstory that follows them everywhere. Launch a new project about workplace wellness, someone leaks another staff complaint. Give an interview about compassion, former employees give anonymous quotes about supposed mistreatment. When the helpers tell their stories, the humanitarian brand doesn't just take a hit, it becomes impossible to maintain, because you can't advocate for treating people with dignity while supposedly treating your own staff with contempt. The hypocrisy is too obvious. The contradiction is too fundamental. And here's what makes this truly permanent. These aren't claims about policy disagreements or strategy differences. These are claims about basic human decency, about whether you treat the people making your meals with respect or supposedly reduce them to tiers over ingredient preferences. You can recover from bad press about media strategy. You can survive criticism about your approach to royal duties, but you can't recover from an established pattern of staff claiming you're cruel to the people who work for you. That's not a PR problem, that's a character problem. The chef's decision to speak out, even anonymously, represents something Meghan can't spin away. It's the testimony of someone who was there, who saw the gap between public compassion and supposed private behavior, and who decided the truth mattered more than the non-disclosure agreement. So that's the pattern that explains everything. The compassion advocate who supposedly left palace staff in tears, the mental health champion who supposedly created the exact toxic environment she claims to be against, the humanitarian whose own employees apparently couldn't handle working for her. You'd probably think this is just another celebrity scandal that will fade when the next news story hits. But here's what actually happens when the people you claim to support start talking. The moral authority your entire brand was built on doesn't just weaken, it completely disappears. Becoming irrelevant isn't just about losing media coverage or public interest, it's about losing the credibility that made anyone care about what you had to say in the first place.